All right, we're live. Welcome everyone to TableTalk, where we talk all things tabletop. I'm your host, the Bad Luck Gamer, with my co-host Glue Boy,
Hello, hello.
and we got a lot to talk about. Now
Oh
that we've had
God,
some
man.
days to digest all the content that's come out, and more content that has come out. We got a lot that we're going to be chatting with y'all here about today. But if you are new to the podcast or watching this after the fact, we tend to get to everything about 25 minutes into the stream. We try to let everyone hop in before we get to the main subjects. So that being the case, go ahead and hop on up to the 25-minute mark, and we'll probably be talking about something relevant to the topic. But before that, some small talk. So Alex, what have you been up to?
Well, uh, speaking of general just Pathfinder stuff, I recently put out a video on Pathfinder. My first of many. I put out my overview video of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. The people that I knew would enjoy it on my channel. I have some tabletop fans that I know play Pathfinder 2e in my community, like the vocal members, actually channel members. So they will hopefully get some good stuff from that, and also who knows, maybe even hop into this community as well, because they need more Pathfinder in their lives, because everyone does. But yeah, I'm gonna start producing stuff on that in time. And so if you're interested in just learning a bit more about Galarian setting, at least just what the vibe is, go over to my channel, Blue Boy, and you can go watch that. It's not that long. It's actually just like 20 minutes. I had immense restraint. And then other than that, man, I've been the problem is playing a CRPG based off an existing tabletop game is now I've been playing the Rogue Trader video game, as I mentioned to you before the stream started. Now I'm looking at the Rogue Trader in the Fantasy Flight 40k CR actual tabletop role playing games, and I'm like, what if?
Right,
What
yeah.
if? And then I'm also reading people talk about them and saying that they're dog shit, but also other people be like, no, but these are the best games ever. And I'm like, who do I believe?
You believe the people who talk at least somewhat positively about it, because they'll also probably be the first ones to tell you what's wrong with the game.
It's a lot of people saying similar things to what you've said about Anima of it's a great game, you'll just have to homebrew some stuff to get it functional.
Yeah,
Depending on
I
which
mean,
one you do, because there's 4 systems of which experience of 40k do you want.
yeah.
Or 5, actually there are 5.
It's definitely hard, looking into tabletop stuff. We were messaging over Discord earlier. One thing that I might try doing in the future is doing a kind of like a version of why you should play, but as interviews with the developers of the game, because they know the game better than anyone. So if anyone's gonna give you the best pitch for a game, it's gonna be the developer. And one, gives me an opportunity to talk to people who are developing content, and two, gives me an opportunity to give a voice to people who make games, because it's not a very common thing that you can really get access to. But I think the biggest one is it gives us some kind of insight into how the game's intended to be played, and what their intent with the game is overall, which is something that I think would be really good. So it's something I'm looking into. I think there's already some prospects on that. And to be fair, the Paizo stuff has been going pretty fine. We've talked
Oh
to,
yeah.
well, 3 of the developers in total, 2 recently. We did talk up to Mark Seifter way early in the channel, actually, so.
From what I know, Dead Phoenix, the Rogue Trader system is simpler on the tabletop. It is not as complicated as the video game. I've read through the core book. All of those talents are more complicated in the video game. The most that you'll see is you have an ability that is like you you have it in those parentheses where it's like you do this ability multiplied by 2 plus that. It's a little bit of math because it's a big D100 system. That's the most, but it is way less complicated than the video game, but it is still a very crunchy combat experience. But from what I have gathered in my research, Rogue Trader is considered the best CRPG of the Fantasy Flight 40k games. Dark Heresy is the one you go to if you want to have a horrific time and be tortured, because it's the one that you can very easily TPK within the first hour of playtime. Because like your psyker is like, oh, let me detect if there's any psychic stuff going on. Oh, I guess there's warp phenomena. Oh no, I triggered a really bad warp phenomena. Then you all die within the first hour of your adventure. Also, apparently everything is done through secret like investigation checks done by the DM. So like against your will, your everyone has a bad perception of you by a secret check done by the GM. So now your mystery is halted and you have to do some weird extra mechanical stuff. It's a mystery game, Dark Heresy, since you're the Inquisition. There's only war if you want to play as guardsmen, and that'll go just as great as it sounds. There's the Death Watch, which only serves as the power fantasy to get out all those bad emotions from dying horribly in only war and Dark Heresy. And then there's the Chaos one. I think it's Let the Galaxy Burn or something, where you play as just Chaos cultists or higher up than that, where you just power fantasy, let's just burn everything to the ground. I had such a horrific, grindy experience and everything else. Let's burn it. Those are the 5 games. Rogue Trader is considered to be the best one. Though, apparently, Dark Heresy 2nd Edition has an absolutely phenomenal Foundry mod. Like, some dev created a fantastic Foundry version, and people played Rogue Trader in the Dark Heresy mod because they're basically the same game with a couple of skills just called something different. But other than that, they're basically the same.
Yeah. And Yo Neurolancer, what's up? Also, yeah, women. Pathfinder players are eating good. Almost too good.
So good. Oh man, there's like constantly so many cool things.
I'm on the verge of getting a panic attack from like all the stuff I have to look into. I just last evening, not just, yeah, true. Well, I mean, kind of. The Starfinder playtest stuff is interesting, but it's still just a playtest, so you can engage with that. It's like beta testing a game, right? It's engage with at your own peril.
I always view the playtests for tabletop games, and also just video games in general, how I view all of it. I'm not a really big like, I'm gonna beta test, I'm gonna get super involved in my feedback. I view it more as I want to know what their current ideas are. I want to see it's like a demo. I want to know what it's going to be. I want an idea of what it's going to be in the future. It's a nice little preview.
I love Paizo, but my bank account freaking hates them. True.
Oh man, yeah.
Thank God I am a content creator and I got all the PDFs for free.
Hey Paizo, how many videos until maybe?
Right.
How many videos? It'll help me out a lot, Paizo.
One of the bad parts though is when it takes them forever to get your stuff out to you, because
yeah,
I didn't get the Tiansha stuff until literally like yesterday evening.
Oh wow.
So I'm like, okay, I will try to get information out, and the Tianxia book is massive. It's huge.
I can imagine.
Suzanne and I were just sitting here scrolling through the book, just kind of doing a quick like look through, and we were at it for like an hour. Like we were just of course we were like reading some things, doing some things over, and we took some longer views of certain parts of the book that I'll talk about probably tomorrow. But it still took us an hour to get through everything. It's a big book. I mean, it's a whole extra continent, right? So there's going to be a lot, and it's really, really cool. Tomorrow, or at least I'm trying for tomorrow, I'll be releasing a video called Should You Get Tianxia World Guide? And I'll give like an overview of it. And then I think I'll do another video talking about the new player options in the World Guide, because there are some, and some of it is really worth talking about. And in fact, I'll give you all a hint as to some of that kind of stuff. There are some rituals in the book that give you access to skill feats, but there are caveats to it.
Interesting. I'm gonna have to watch this video when it comes out, because I'm very excited for that book. I wanna get my hands on it when it actually releases for the public.
And Neural Answer, as you probably haven't watched many streams before, we get talking about the subject in around like the 25-minute mark. So we're just letting people hop in to the chat, which people seem to be doing. So we'll be getting to that here real quick. But yeah, I mean, and I mean, to be fair, I will be covering the Starfinder stuff, which is going to be a lot. And like the crazy part is, in the midst of all this, I also have D&D 2024 at some point this like later half of the year, whatever D&D does with that, because I feel like I have to, because no one else knows what's going on, and I'm sure everyone's going to be talking about it, but I feel like there's a lot of people who are curious, even if they don't like D&D 5e, or at least don't like it anymore. So Ramayana or Journey to the West. I'm very familiar with Journey to the West, yes.
Same. I Journey to the West, and I at least know...
it's a classic.
Yeah, I know Ramayana. I would not be surprised if I have at least studied it a while ago. Let me look it up. Yeah, I remember at least going through this for a history course in college. I'd not read it though, sadly. It was very cool in that history course though.
Ramayana Supreme Archer build. Sounds interesting.
Just the two classes. I keep seeing people talk about the two classes, and they look really interesting, or at least like the little hints we're getting about them. And I think the commander is being talked about a lot for a good reason. And yeah, it's also the part that gets me. The part that endlessly gets me is it's the point that I think is the thing to really hammer in about how nice Pathfinder is and how nice Paizo actually treats its like customers. Is in the video I made, the joke I made is like, I make these big tabletop overview videos, and normally I go through every class, but I can't because Paizo made 23 classes for Pathfinder. That's too many. I'm gonna cover just a couple. Also, by the way, just to talk about how egregious this is, by the end of the year, it's going to be 25 because we're getting 2 more. literally, as I'm getting done editing it, they have 2 more classes announced. And I have to update the joke.
Yeah.
Paizo, calm down. And then not even accounting the class archetypes that are getting announced too, that look sick. I'm very excited for that investigator one, actually.
Yeah, me
I'm
too.
really curious
Palatine
what it is.
Eye seems very interesting. Divine Mysteries is a book I'm very much looking forward to.
Same. Also, just all the art they showed off for it looks so cool.
Mm-hmm.
That giant piece of Pharasma, like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so
I
good.
like Imade and the Starstone Chapel.
Yeah, the like eye going up into the page, like the like the crystal borders that it was doing was
Mm-hmm.
so dope. I like the little. I also like the little raven. I like the little raven guy.
Yeah, Yvel.
I like Yuvel.
Yveli.
I it's so cool. I want that book. That's another book where I'm just like I want to read it. I just want to read through and like go through it.
I really hope it's like that, Death Phoenix, honestly. And to jump back to Oyman's previous comment of don't like 5e anymore. Hey, don't snipe me like that. That was me.
That's
I
us.
I really liked 5e when I first started running. I did Adventure League for a good amount of time. Because it was interesting. It's just a game that the longer you use it, the more you realize how many holes are in the system. And it's like, oh, okay, I had to patch this one up too. That's just how it is. Pathfinder is literally the only system I've played that seems so airtight, like all around.
It's a game that it doesn't feel like you have to patch it constantly. Every once in a while, there's like a little thing where we change it, like we have the stride and interact, like you can draw your weapon, or
Yeah,
the fact that like when you go down, you don't drop your stuff. Like, because
yeah,
those are like little tiny adjustments where it's like, yeah, we could do this as written, like we could do this rules raw, but that sounds annoying and tedious.
yeah. I
and
mean,
and
it's
like
just
it's
trimming the
nothing
fat.
yeah, it's nothing substantial that you have to do for some other games, like literally like what we were talking about with like say the Fantasy Flight 40k games, anima, or what you have to do for D&D, which is just homebrew. I hope you like homebrew.
Yeah,
make
right.
your own
D&D
make your own
homebrew the
tabletop game.
game. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's that kind of deal. It's the type of game where the longer you play it, really it just kind of becomes your own game as it goes on. So like, are you a fan of D&D, or are you a fan of like just the game that you designed with like your weird mishmash of homebrew?
Yeah. And for the Pathfinder stuff we fixed, like I've had people literally try to tell me, no, you have to keep the pickup rules and when after like coming up from being unconscious.
Like,
Otherwise, fighter is just better than monk. And I'm like, if you're balancing all your encounters based on everyone going unconscious at least once, that's a different problem that I think needs to be addressed.
I don't. I'm just baffled by the idea of any of that, because that sounds annoying to deal with. And also like, yeah, if your integral balance is like the only thing keeping this intact is the fact that when you go down you drop your weapon, it's like, what? Then why can't wouldn't the solution to that be like, what if I just chained my sword to my hand? Like, what if I just tie a rope and like deal with that? I don't know. This seems like a non-issue. It seems like literally nothing happens if this rule changes.
Yeah. I mean,
And it hasn't for us. We have our fights are just as challenging, just as like tough, and like I feel like the only thing that would happen if you implemented that rule is we'd be like, yeah, this is a little annoying. Okay, anyways, I have one less action on my turn,
yeah.
and like
It,
that's the extent.
it's like when you try to have climbing in combat. It's
Yeah.
never fun. No one likes climbing in combat.
It's just tedious. It's the difference between like what I always argue. It's the ideas of like, is this game design or are you adding tedium? Because tedium is not game design.
Yeah.
This isn't anything. You're just making me do something like a constant thing annoyingly, which is my annoyance with a lot of games,
Yeah.
like
Is the
video games too.
rule in any way trying to enhance the fun factor?
Yeah. Or is this purely busy work? Like, what feasibly is added to the experience by this being here is always the question I think of. And if the answer is like, it's something to do, usually that's not a good sign. Because it's like, well, then that's just busy work.
But speaking on games and mechanics, let's talk about the new classes that are coming out. Commander and Guardian. I think the chat's biting at the bit now, ready to go. I am very excited. We've been getting a lot of information, actually. And Alex, you were saying you were trying to find all the information about it earlier. Did you
I was
find
doing my
everything?
best. Yeah, I was doing my best to track down the little bits of extra information that we got. I think I have it because some of the stuff was talked about in our Discord, thankfully, which is one that I posted and another one that was posted by specifically Easy Does It. It's a very helpful member of our community here. Which, just in case you're watching this after the fact, thank you.
Yes, thank you. You're very helpful. So from what I know, Commander has been specified as a prepared marshal.
Which is very cool sounding.
It makes me think along the lines of D&D's actual Battlemaster subclass for fighter, where you have your battle maneuvers or whatever that you pick from. I feel like Commander is going to be similar. You're going to have like strategies that you can choose from every day to like as different things you can use, or maybe it's another resource management class where you have so many battle points or whatever strategy points that you
Yeah.
can use.
To the two sources that I know that gave any form of explanation of what it is. The more helpful one that specifically talks about Commander. This is a quote from the blog, or the forum specifically. I will quote Michael Sayers' post exactly. Michael Sayers is responding to a post saying, at the same time, yes, the commander is very warlord. That's cool. More party OP, more better. He responds, just for you, because you're cool and I like you.
Yeah.
I'll drop one little commander hint ahead of the playtest that will have you theorizing until release day. If you're a casual fan of TTRPGs, the commander sounds a lot like warlord or marshal or kind of even some bards, etc. The sentence I wanted to use that we decided was a little too technical for a broad audience announcement, and probably legitimately not spicy enough, is that one could fairly describe the commander as a prepared marshal, kind of similar to the way one might talk about a prepared caster.
Yeah. So that's what it leaves me at that kind of crossroad. Either one, we have different maneuvers that we can pick through in a list, and we just have to choose which ones we're gonna have for the day, which strategies, or there's gonna be some battle point system that we're going to use in order to give out like our strategies. I don't know, and I don't know which one sounds better, because on one hand, if Commander is actually like a somewhat advanced class where you have to kind of manage your resource and you have so many maneuvers at your disposal like all the time, I think that's really cool. But
Hmm.
I think having a more streamlined flow of you have certain maneuvers that that you can swap through every day is a little bit better. But that feels more like almost spontaneous spellcasting in a way.
Yeah. Like if
So
you can just every single day switch it out, because what you were mentioning with the Battle Master from 5e is you only get to pick those, and like they're locked in the moment you select them.
yeah.
And like if it's like that, but then every day you can prepare them and like switch them around, or even maybe you have to learn them in a similar way as like Wizard. Uh, like you have to study tomes of battle or something, and like maybe study like military history and learn new tactics and like
Well,
copy them down.
I think if they're going, because the whole point of the commander is it's a support class.
Yeah, it's a martial
So
support class.
uh I think if they're gonna skin it, they're gonna say these are the strategies you've prepared with everyone else for the day. You
Yeah,
know. So
maybe
like
like
these are your
the
practice
flavors.
maneuvers.
Yeah, maybe the flavors like like you an hour every morning you like practice with your squad, or like you discussed what the plans are, and like, all right, if I do this, you guys do that.
Yeah.
That's a cool
Uh
idea.
it seems like the commander is very much based on giving extra actions to everyone else.
Movement,
So
actions, reactions, and more.
yeah. I feel like the commander is gonna play with the action economy a lot more than other classes do by essentially giving their actions to other people or having extra reactions to let other people do some certain things. It would be cool if it was a class that actually had extra reactions natively, just like out the
Mm.
gate, like at level 1. Just the ability, your whole thing is you have reactions to help your team during a combat, which I think would be
Yeah,
very cool.
or at the very least, like, like after a couple levels, they get a second reaction. Because I agree, I think they should have an extra reaction as like their class. It just depends on what they find the internal balance to be. Do they want to give it right away, or do they want to wait a couple levels and then give it to you? Because I think that's true. They should have that.
Yeah. I think that would be the most interesting. I think
Mhm.
also when we're looking at feats, I mean, so here's the thing. Every single class in Pathfinder has multiple kind of play styles in mind. So if we take that into consideration, then what would what would be different commander styles, do you think?
Yeah, because there's usually, I'm gonna open up Path Builder to directly be like referencing what usually some of the subclass examples are, because a lot of them are based off of different skills basically. When it
Well,
usually
yes,
comes around it
kind
is
of.
how
So
I.
like fighter for instance can build dual wielding fighter, range fighter, sword and shield fighter, like the athletics kind of bully build fighter. Barbarian can play in a lot of fashions of like this is the unstoppable barbarian. They can break through walls, they can break out of grips, they can do all kinds of stuff. Uh then there's like hardy barbarians, there's like multi-strike barbarians. Bard, it's just all about what compositions you're working. Are you using only compositions, or are you intermixing spells, all that kind of stuff. Cleric has kind of been divided into war priest and cloistered pretty much already. And it's every class. There's not a single class that does not have a different build route that does something slightly different. So a commander, I feel like there might be like a reaction commander, and I feel like there might be like maybe like a buff commander. You know, a
Mm,
commander that gives more like buffs to, and to whenever they're like adjacent to allies or something, you know.
I wonder if there's then one I think that might be is because it's a martial support class, there's going to be one that probably leans a little bit more heavily to the martial end of martial support, almost the lead by example, follow my lead, that entire idea of like I inspire you with how cool I'm being.
Mm-hmm. But it should be martial level. That's kind of the hard part that I'm trying to find and discern between the two, is like, I don't think it's gonna be necessarily exactly like martial, because I feel like if they were gonna do it, they would have just held martial back for something else. I feel like Commander is all about the action economy. So like, how can that be affected? Maybe there are certain reactions for different types of weapons. Like the commander can give a 2-action call out, and all allies with range weapons can use a reaction to strike the given target. You know.
Yeah, if it's like a front line, like sword and board, or a back line, like I have a bow and I'm calling out weak points kind of deal.
Is it frontline or more like a tactician? Yeah, I don't know. And that's the cool thing about Commander. And whether or not it's actually going to be an intelligence-based class, they did say it's an intelligent character, but they did not say it's an intelligence-based class necessarily. And yeah, that Mirgos did mention, or did state, it would be nice if it's actually a wisdom-based martial, because there's not really a wisdom-based martial. And I feel like that's almost a better choice, because I feel like if you made it intelligence, because what happens is whenever you give a specific like non-combat based attribute as your main thing, it pushes you to use those skills more often. And I feel like recall knowledge is something that this class won't want to do, because its action economy is going to be very like taken up all the time anyway, while wisdom increases their perception, which I think is more useful. In like, you get better perception checks, for instance, your initiative is innately better. I think it's also medicine it benefits as well.
Yeah, the only other thing I could see, because I remember them in the stream mentioning like saying it's a very intelligent class, like emphasizing that. The only other thing I could see, just playing the other side is I mean, what could stop them from like doing what they did with psychic? Because psychic has you can choose between intelligence and wisdom, or is it intelligence and charisma? You can choose between what your key stat is.
Yeah, a lot of
Like
classes
they,
kind of toy around with that.
I mean, maybe that'd be a fun idea for what the commander could be doing, is the which style, because like a commander. I mean, imagine a commander that provokes recall knowledge. Like because I mean, there are skills that are like that you make an attack and then you recall knowledge with your attack, but imagine you order your ally to attack, and then your ally is like, oh, I have this, your ally has a lore skill on a specific enemy, then they can recall knowledge.
You know what would be really cool is the commander gives extra actions to their allies as free actions rather than reactions.
Oh, like imagine then yeah, in that case, like, oh, I know this guy, this character has an ability for this, so like he can recall knowledge this demon we're fighting. He has a demon lore. Well, I'm gonna give him a free action this next turn, on his next turn, for recall knowledge.
Oh, it can be immediate even. It's just like,
Pretty
hey, what do you
immediate,
know
yeah.
about this? Free action, they can do it. Doesn't use their reaction and allows that character to do it. Like, it's like, because if you could do something like that, that would allow classes like Champion that has a very good reaction and doesn't want to waste it elsewhere to actually be utilized with this class. And it the thing is you don't there's nothing gains necessarily. It's just you're giving your action to someone else without like any extra costs.
Yeah, you're also that's in a fun way, I think. I think that'd be a fun way to design and incentivize your character role playing out, like learning your party and like playing around your party. Cause like that's the whole thing we've kind of seen when talking with the devs that we have is kind
Hmm.
of like mechanically role playing out, these story moments. So it could also incentivize your players to really talk out and learn at the table. What are the best ways to utilize what my party has? Because you, as a commander, if you want to be like a big brain commander, can learn like, all right, I'm gonna actually learn what my party's strengths and weaknesses are, what their skills are, so I can maximize and use it. So if you're like a big brain player, you're like, I know everyone's strengths. I can use you to the best of your ability. Like that'd be like just some fun moments of like tactics in like role play.
Yeah. So that's something interesting. I think the Commanders is going to be a lot of fun. I think if they do it right, which I mean, to be fair, the playtest is our opportunity to tell them what would be more fun.
Yeah.
So that's the great opportunity we have. And to be fair, so I want to preface this before like we continue talking. The playtest is going to be inherently wonky
Yes.
because when they playtest things, they want to throw a lot of ideas at the wall to see what sticks. And it's not necessarily going to be the most balanced because some of the things that they're going to throw out are going to be set up in a way where they're going to test something that might not even be directly the ability you're using, but how it's set up affects things. Like, it's funny because the commander also seems like a sure in for like the or sure win for the warlord lore skill, because that's a very common one and one that I have had like surprising use for my players anyway in the
It
games.
comes up a lot.
It's
Yeah.
just something that like is very useful. And so it makes me think if they're going to be similar to Thaumaturge, where they have like some skills they need to use based on a warlord skill check, essentially. So it's something that I think is very interesting. And they're going to throw a bunch of wacky stuff at the wall to see what sticks. So, whatever we see, don't consider that the final product. And if it feels wonky, it's probably because it is, and they're going to smooth it out over the course of like the next, I don't know, 8 months or something. It's not coming out till 2025. It's definitely not releasing in the first 3 months of the year because it's like one of the worst quarters in the year to have any big releases, with March being maybe the only exception. But even then, if it comes out, it's probably gonna come out like April at the soonest, but I doubt even then. It's probably not gonna be till like June, July.
Yeah. And like yeah, that's the bit to keep in mind. Something we've seen a few times now with the kineticist and the exemplar animus playtest is there's just there we've seen people who weirdly talk about it like, ah, this class sucks and it's going to suck because like it I don't know, I can't like seeing the language that like, oh man, this final draft is so bad. It's like, why
Yeah.
do you guys forget what a playtest means? What is going on? It not this community, but like just we interacting with it on the Reddit and the Twitter, like seeing it. It's like, what is going on? What's happening? Yes, this exemplar ability is busted. That they're messing around with the math and seeing what happens. Like
Yeah,
you throw your weird stuff out to see what happens.
I'm still curious if they're still giving bow exemplars the ability to attack all enemies on the battlefield
It'll
as a
be reduced most
I, I'm
likely.
I sure hope so, because otherwise that's like, I mean, to be fair, it's like a level 20 feat or something, like the 18 or 20. So like it's kind of whatever, but at the same time it's also just the strongest one because it's like strike all enemies within your first range increment. well, when you have a bow that has a range increment of 150 feet,
Yeah.
it's like, I hit all enemies on the battlefield. Yeah, sure, it's all 3 of my actions. Sure. But I just get 5 attacks at my full, attack modifier. So,
Yeah.
eh.
Exactly. It's goofy strong, and I think didn't they directly reference that in like the playtest stuff?
I don't remember if they actually did mention it out loud or not.
I thought they did. I thought they said like, "Oh yeah, we've heard you talk about how strong this is."
Maybe.
I thought I
I don't
remember them
know.
mentioning that and being like talking about like that was a little unintended. Which is funny, but yeah, Exemplar is I can't wait to see what they're cooking. And then yeah, the Guardian bit,
Yeah,
which let me
Guardian.
look at what the blog is saying, which the blog all we have currently, which I at least unless there's more talk somewhere else that I was not able to find. The most that we saw was on the Paizo blog recap for the stream, which all they say is that the Guardian is an armored tank who can taunt opponents and maximize the effectiveness of heavy armor to be a bulwark against nearly any threat. And that's it.
Yeah, well, there was a the mention of taunt is super interesting
Yeah, that's the big one.
because is it a taunt in the sense of like several abilities in the game, enemies are punished in some way for not targeting the character, or is it a legit taunt where the enemy must spend an action taunt like attacking the Guardian? Because those are 2 very different things, and in the hands of some GMs, if it's not forcing them to attack the Guardian, then they're just not going to have any enemies attack the Guardian. Because it seems like the Guardian's whole point is to be hit, and there's GMs out there who are going to be like, well, enemies are going to look at this guy and be like, hitting this guy is pointless, so why would I do it, Which I always hate that argument, because it completely ignores the realities of battle. When you're in a battle situation, you're actively fighting people, you're most concerned with the thing closest to you more often than not.
True.
And like that's also just a thing of like sometimes you just aren't aware of what else is happening on the battlefield, because like your zone of like perception is so pulled in because you're fighting for your life. So like just being next to an enemy should be enough to like at least make them spend actions on you in some way, even if they don't want to fight you, disengaging from you in some form or fashion. So I don't know. I think Guardian is very much going to be I really think that if they're going to do anything, they're going to force enemies to spend actions at the very least if they want to avoid striking the Guardian outright, or just, the Guardian just has a straight up taunt that like forces them to attack them, in which case that's kind of fun. And in a game sense, it's not broken, right? Because most battles, and they say this over and over and over, and people can't understand, they don't want you to have a singular enemy fighting the players. Like, almost never. So, if it's a taunt that forces the enemy to attack them, even if it's just once, that's not overly strong, in my opinion. And something that's particularly good, and even if they had like an area taunt, I still don't think that's necessarily that bad, because it's probably going to be all enemies within like maybe a 10-foot emanation or something like that. Another aspect to it is it seems like it's going to be a class that is very focused on heavy armor, which but is probably going to have abilities that focus on getting extra benefits from heavy armor. The only problem is the APs don't seem to know that, at least until recently. Yeah, and I mean, that's a thing, but the core game developers are rarely the people working on the APs specifically.
Mm.
So, there's obviously going to be a little bit of crossing of the wires, I think, at that juncture.
I also am still holding out hope that the Guardian will have some form of like subclass thing about dual shield fighting. Because I think that'd be enough of a vibe for a subclass for the Guardian.
I think it'd be interesting, especially if they're dual shield wielding, and by doing so, that gives them just an extra reaction for shield block. I think would be fun.
Would be funny. Could also another thing, because I know this is another character vibe. Thorned armor, or spike armor, which is I know in video games the whole like dodge rolling into enemies hurts them. That's also could be a fun vibe for this style of character. Because like the one part that's harder to speculate is just because I was actually delving into the blogs to see if any devs have leaked anything about this. None. However, I did find some extra details about War of Immortals.
Oh.
It's more from the hardcover stuff for War of Immortals, which was posted recently. Because they've listed what's in the book now, which is obviously new feats and lineages for Nephilim characters. The two new classes, the Animus and Exemplar. 5 new class archetypes, including the Avenger Rogue archetype and the Blood Rager Barbarian archetype.
Yep.
Rules for Mythic play. 9 Mythic Destinies, including the Fearsome Apocalypse Rider and the Undying Eternal Legend. New weapons, items, and spells for Mythic characters, and 8 terrifying new Mythic monsters and rules for creating Mythic threats of your own. I know Blood Rager is something people like, because I know that name. That was in Wrath of the Righteous. So it's from Pathfinder 1st Edition. And an Apocalypse Rider sounds pretty sick, actually.
I'm curious if they're going to go with a system similar to Wrath of the Righteous, where you have your like mythic path essentially that you can pick up feats from, and that's what the destinies are. I don't know, but it sounds like that's the route they're going.
I wouldn't be surprised. That sounds like a pretty cool way of doing that.
But back to Guardian before we start talking about anything else.
Yeah.
Guardian, I think, this is another thing as well. Paizo is very good about not necessarily shoehorning characters into specific play styles when they pick a class. Like, you can still be a champion who uses a two-handed sword. You don't have to be a sword and board champion or anything like that. And with the Unholy Oaths, essentially, you can play a much more selfish style of character. And similar with Bard, you don't have to just be a cantrip monkey. You can just go around and use like some of their other feats pretty well that are not necessarily focused on their composition cantrips. So I don't think the Guardian is necessarily going to be forced to use a shield like at all. I think armor is a big aspect of it, and that's the part they highlighted. But shields specifically, I don't think are gonna play into the class, at least inherently.
No, I that's why I specifically would word it as a double shield subclass. Is like, this is a thing you opt into, or as someone else puts it, as Dead Phoenix puts it, a feat chain. Like, it is a thing you could look at and be like, here's a thing you level into, but then like that is an option of like, you've learned how to fight with shields. We can amplify shields because it's a bit with you can know how to maximize armor and like you know how to maximize heavy armor. So
Yeah.
then it also kind of implies like defensive stuff. Maybe you also could play a character that learns how to maximize just shields. So there can also be just raw armor, but they're very good at that. You can play a lot of different ideas like built around it. I'm curious what those other ideas might be because I'm also thinking of a characters like what if well, Guardian let me. I bet you could. Heavy armor, no weapons. I maximize my heavy armor because my armor is big and metal. I punch you in the face. Unarmed fighter. Martial artist, but I'm slow and like you hear me coming.
Maybe. I don't know. Something I just thought of that might be really cool for the Guardian. What if they have a reaction very similar to the monks? What's it called? Bum, 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 bum. Standstill. Yeah, guys got to for a standstill where it's a reaction where they can, rather than making an attack roll against the enemy, can make a athletics check against the enemy, and if they succeed they stop the enemy's movement and shove them at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
So slightly better than standstill at the cost of you're not getting an attack. Rather, you're using your athletics against probably the enemy's reflex DC or something like that. And essentially, you become like one of those pinball like uh, bouncers where you're just like they're running at your ally, and you're like, nope, poof, and you stop their movement immediately and shove them like up to 10 feet away.
That would be sick.
That would be
Uh,
kind of fun.
that would be very fun. And two points here that I like in the chat. First one, like Mir goes, I think that is a good idea for probably one of the playstyles that you
I'll
could
be right back.
easily hit with Guardian. The idea of like damage mitigation for allies, like playing a support. I don't think it's going to be the pure class, only because like for a class itself, Paizo, like we were saying, is very good at having just a wide array of it. And if Guardian, I think, was designed to be a pure support class, I think they would say it. Because in the stuff where they were talking about it, they said is that Guardian is a heavy armor class that amplifies heavy armor. That's basically all they've mentioned. I think that they can then go into, like when you're picking your subclasses and your feats and stuff, go into the idea of you mitigate damage, you are playing the bodyguard, you are defending your allies. But like in a champion way, but have other ways of doing it, not magically. Which there's other elements of something that's mentioned in our Discord of playing a lot of those like shield defensive elements, but also not have it tailored around like undead. And then another bit is the idea of as is also mentioned, I'm the Juggernaut. I would not be surprised if there was a Juggernaut style run through like charge. You have heavy armor. Once you get moving, you have momentum. That would be awesome. That would be the style I play, to be completely honest. Is once you start moving, it's hard to get you to stop. Things that you do have a little extra force behind it. Because I'm more of a DPS player. I'm not as much of a support guy. I think that Guardian might get better armor specialization and more resistance because that seems like that's what they're saying. Because just to see it, Guardian is an armored tank who can taunt opponents and maximize the effectiveness of heavy armor to be a bulwark against nearly any threat. Then it also could be a thing where Guardian maybe they can change up their resistances. They have maybe in their daily preparations even augment their armor to change resistances every day or something. Maybe they know they're going into a situation, they can augment something that feels more inventory. Yeah, it's just like champion, sentinel, blast. Like, there's a lot of things that this feels like it's kind of being a mix of, but also I think that Paizo is pretty good at not having classes feel like they are doing the same thing mechanically. And the other bit I wonder is the wording of this. Is Guardian also going to be doing this by buffing other people's armor at all?
Hmm.
Like, that's because they're very non-particular if this is all centered on yourself or if you're also doing this for other people. Because like when you hear all of this, it's like you have the idea of like the bodyguard character, but also like, is there a little bit of magic sprinkled into this? Maybe for even like something you can opt into. Who knows? They've said literally nothing about this. We have a literal sentence or two to go off of.
Yeah, that's true. Another thing that might be interesting is it's another pick a target kind of class where you pick a enemy you're bodyguarding against essentially, and you get a reaction to interpose a strike meant for an ally that the enemy is striking at.
Mm.
There's a lot of interesting things. I think a lot of people here are kind of targeting more magic-esque kind of abilities to Guardian. And something I want to talk about is what kind of book are these classes being brought into? Because seasoned fighters or seasoned warriors is particularly highlighted in the slide that they were talking about them. Yeah. And I feel like there's going to be a martial book. I feel like we've had essentially a book for every kind of magic. You could argue that technically Secrets of Magic is not an arcane book per se because it really added to a lot of magic in general. But I mean, we had
Yeah.
Secrets of Magic, which is essentially the arcane book. We had the Dark Archive, which is the occult book. We had Rage of Elements, which is the primal book. And now we're going to have War of the Immortals, which is very clearly the divine book. So I feel like we're going to go into a martial book.
Mm.
Something I'm really, really hoping for is a martial book that not only gives a little bit of tuning more to some of the other martial classes to give them some more stuff, but also just a book that has a lot more weapons in it. Give me more weapons. Give me a bunch more advanced weapons. Give me weapons I have to really
Yes.
try to be like good at.
Yeah, I want some more stuff like that. Cause also, yeah, the book is called Battle Cry. I do agree that I think it's not gonna be a very magic-y book. I think same vein of this is going to be a non-magical class. Probably then I would pivot what my speculation is that there could also be options in this that what if this is a more restrained inventor instead of like a mad scientist inventor. You have crafting stuff, but it's like, I'm going to patch up your armor, repair it, make it stronger, like a practical battlefield like repairman kind of deal, that like I can also buff my allies armor and make it stronger, which could
Maybe.
also be an element that it can do. Because it's the language that is being used, that was used both in the stream and in the announcement, is very non-specific who the target is of the armor enhancement, to where it sounds like it can go both ways, to where like it is an armored tank, but it can maybe target both sides, which I think is typically in line with Paizo's very open class design.
Yeah. So both of these playtests, I mean, we're going to look at on here on the channel.
Oh
So
yeah.
stay tuned, follow, subscribe, like the whatever. I'm doing call outs. Because we're going to be doing a lot of stuff with Paizo coming up soon. And we're definitely going to be having another table talk as soon as this stuff comes out. Because it comes out on a Monday. So we get a few days to digest it before we'll be getting to talk about it.
Yeah, I'll be
And
reading through it.
that's super cool. I think that we definitely were in need of some more straightforward martial classes, because admittedly, Thaumaturge was the last class to come out that's essentially a martial class, and it was a lot more convoluted and a lot more complicated than just being a martial, and its strengths were very much not focused martially. Now, if we look further back and we look at Guns and Gears, then yeah, both of those classes are a lot more martial, and so I think there's room for maybe some non or some more magically martial kind of things, but I really just do want some other, like, give me a weapon and set me into the battlefield kind of classes. Like, if Guardian can be converted into like a Juggernaut style class, I think that would be really kind of cool.
I think so. That's the one I want, is the idea of you are very heavy, use that momentum. I think that'd be really fun.
Yeah. And like your whole thing is mitigating damage. Like, if Guardian can be played somewhat selfishly too, I think that would be good as well. I don't know. And I feel like they understands that you can't make an entire class completely around just supporting people unless that's like the core
No.
theme of the class, like Commander.
Yeah, like going into Commander, I think that's the vibe. The only thing I can see possibly is the idea of you are playing selfishly that gives support benefits, but your support benefits are lesser. Like the idea of there is a version of Commander that is leading by example. You do something so
Hmm.
impressive that grants bonuses. Like you get crit effects on abilities. Like when you crit, this happens to the nearest ally or something. Things like that. That is the method I could possibly see to an idea of a selfish commander playstyle. But I think inherently it's always going to be a support class. For Guardian, I don't think so.
Yeah. So we'll have to see. I'm more excited for Commander, but more curious about Guardian, because I feel like Guardian's the one that is potentially stepping on the most toes in the game overall, and
Mm-hmm.
I can't see a clear path where it has a very unique mechanic that makes it stand out in comparison to like a lot of other classes. So that's the one where I feel like I'm going to be pleasantly surprised when it comes out.
I think so too.
And if, you know, when you also put the context onto it of this is a class that we're going to show you some kind of bonkers feats for, or like we're going to kind of throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. Guardian sounds very interesting when you put it in that context, because it's just like, okay, how crazy can we get with a Guardian? Like the idea of a Guardian. That's something that
Yeah.
I think is very interesting.
That's why I'm hoping. Imagine there's a Juggernaut version and then they add spiked armor to where I'm like, all right, let me just run around the battlefield really fast and
Yeah.
like run through people. The bit I'm most curious about is it's something that's being brought up every once in a while in chat. How, and like we brought it up earlier too, how the taunt ability is going to work, because
Hmm.
it's going to be, if it's not very clad in like writing, it's going to be very GM specific, because like there will be the GMs that are like, I don't want to hit you though.
Yeah.
I know you're standing in my face, and like this big metal character is actively wailing on me, but there's a healer right around there around the corner that I'm aware of. So I want to go run around there and like kill the healer. Tactically, if I'm looking at this over top, that's the right decision. Taunting, it's like the taunt will have to be like I don't know how they have to run the taunt if it's like a declared taunt, and like the next attack action has to be like made against this character, like if they fail a save or something.
Yeah, I don't know if they're gonna force an attack necessarily. Uh, it might just be, it has to be like an action directed at the character specifically.
Yeah.
Uh, there's some other ways that a taunt could be effective without forcing an attack. I think Dead Phoenix mentioned it earlier, where essentially a character is like slowed when they're not. It's essentially a slow where they just lose an action when you taunt them if you don't attack them.
Yeah, it's a debuff that's significant enough. And it's also the style of you are supporting because like it's just the role of a big scary like frontliner is like the role of that character is to be like, yeah, you could, I guess, like take your attention away and go attack my backline doing other stuff. But I'm literally in your face going to stab you in the chest right now.
Yeah,
And in I mean, in an actual fight, it's the bit of the moment you lightly like move your attention, that is the moment you are like dead. Because
yeah,
there's a lot of elements you can actually see in like even competitive fighting. There's just a moment where someone lightly changes their guard, and that's the moment the fight ends. Because
yeah.
like they just their attention slips slightly, and so like that's just kind of how it changes in the difference between like a game that is a giant tactical overview to like person to person combat.
Another option that I think might make the Guardian interesting is if they focus on the reposition action,
Yeah.
where they essentially just are like, you're now over here, enemy. And now if you want to get to my ally, you're going to have to use a stride action or something along those lines.
Mm.
So I definitely think Guardian has a lot of, like, has a lot of subtle potential that Paizo is definitely, like, Paizo doesn't make bad classes, period.
No,
They do not
they've been very good
miss.
about it.
So, that being the case, I think it's going to be a class that is going to surprise a lot of people. And I think that's something that is very fun. I think it's something that can be very surprising, and if they add enough selfish elements into it, I feel like it's a class that anyone can enjoy. So I think that's something that needs to happen. Commander, I think, is already like a shoe in. It's kind of like Exemplar. Like Exemplar was always going to be cool. It was always going to be kind of sick, and
Yeah.
Animus kind of had to pull up the rear to kind of make people want to play it.
Hmm.
And I feel like Guardian is just Animus only for marshals. So we'll see. I'm very excited. But let's talk about some of the other stuff that's been announced secretly. Uh Specifically, I want to talk about Blood Rager and Avenger Rogue.
Yeah, because I don't know much about what that implies. Because I know the Blood Rager name, I don't know how much weight Avenger Rogue has behind it. If it does have any. I also haven't seen any details on it.
So, Blood Ragers were essentially barbarian sorcerers
Oh.
that use their rage for casting spells. Battle Harbinger is also going to be really good. I think Battle Harbinger is literally just War Priest isn't War Priest enough for me. So give me more War Priests.
Give me more war in my priest.
Yeah, give me more War in my Priest. The ratios weren't good enough before.
Yeah.
Because
What's these spells doing in my cleric? Get it out of here.
I feel like what Harbinger's going to do is you're going to get less spell slots per level in exchange for, I don't know, because like I don't even know if it's like proficiency bonuses that they're gonna get. but maybe they'll get something like weapon, expertise where they do extra damage with their weapons or something.
Mm.
I'm not 100% sure on what it's going to do, but I do feel like it's just going to be exactly the War Priest wasn't War Priest enough, so give me more War in my Priest. Thank
I
you.
think so too. Oh yeah,
Uh,
yeah. And then in case people didn't see it, there was the Amazon listing for Player Core 2 showed that there's gonna be Dragon Blood Versatile Heritage
yeah, Dragon
dropping.
Blood. Cool character art too. It just looks like a dude with the oh goodness, the primal dragon, the beast dragon. What was that dragon? What was it called? I don't remember. It's not a bad dragon by any means, but it was the one I paid the least amount of attention to.
Damn. I mean, to be fair, there's some hype dragons in that list, so when you got some of the good contenders like Conspirator Dragon in there, it's hard to remember. Was it Horned Dragon?
Horn dragon, yes. Yeah, I mean when you had like Diablo dragon and the Fortune dragon, which is just a really or not Fortune dragon, the Imperial dragon. It it was a very rough list to go up. The horn, yeah, it just has a horn dragon's head. Which, to be fair, also thanks Prime Ambition for the follow. And if you haven't done so already, we are on Twitch and we do accept Prime subs. So any Prime subs you might have that you have not used so far, definitely can use them. We also have some alerts and stuff. Just just something to help grease the wheels a little bit on the channel. Thank you, Creativeverse, for the follow. But yeah, so I do love the idea though. I don't like the image because it's just again it just looks like a person with a horned dragon's head. But then again, I like the humanoid looks that have like dragon horns and scales on them, Even though that's pretty like overdone, I just like that aesthetic. Like I play an hour raw in Final Fantasy 14, so which is exactly that. So that being the case, I think they're really cool conceptually, and if we want to play like a more humanoid version of them, I will fully support it because just having dragon powers is really cool. I
True.
think like just scales, horns, whatever, just being part dragon seems really cool. The Omen dragon, actually, now that I think about it, just think of an Omen blood dragon with the Oracle class. It's super silly. There's a lot of very interesting stuff I think that's coming up with that. But yeah, the Blood Rager is going to be very interesting. What I think a lot of people might be hoping for is it's a type of barbarian that might suffer some damage loss, but for the ability to cast spells while raging. Or maybe it's a type of barbarian that has focus spells that they can use only while raging. You need to like focus spells with the rage trait. So if that's the case, that's actually kind of cool. If it's just you have special blood rage spells. And then the Avenger rogue. Let's see here. Not one I'm very familiar with, mostly probably just because it's so edgy sounding.
Is that a thing from first edition?
Oh, guess not. There's the Mysterious Avenger archetype for Swashbuckler.
Oh, so it's probably maybe something new. There's the Fists of the Avenger class.
Considering it's coming out, so you gotta remember this is all coming out in War of the Immortals. So that being the case, it's probably something to do with being like a religious assassin kind of thing. I have
Maybe it's the answer for those people whose god is gonna die.
maybe that's actually very interesting. I
Because they
think
put out a post saying what will happen to those people in Pathfinder Society who are playing clerics and like champions of Gorham in society play, which is saying that all of your Gorham deity stuff, like all your abilities, is going to cease the moment he dies, and that you will get a free rebuild. So maybe Avenger is like the version of that, of like, how do you play a character that's going to continue kind of revering your dead god? Which I think would be cool. That sounds awesome.
I don't think there's gonna be an Avenger iconic because this is just a class archetype.
Yeah, I don't. They don't do. I don't. Do class archetypes even have iconics?
I mean, they have art.
Yeah, true. I
Most
don't
of
know if
them
they have
do.
iconics. For all I know, there was mentions that like it's not something that they're going to try to like touch with Inquisitor, but it could be at least the thing that's reminiscent of it. So who knows? I at least, if it's the idea of an Avenger rogue, though it is a rogue specifically, so it could also be that bit you mentioned of like the divine assassin.
Well,
I
yeah,
think it's
because
also
again,
another
it's
idea for
coming
that.
out in this book. So,
Yeah.
like, the Palatine Eye detective is still like it is gets investigator divine spellcasting like stuff, and I feel like a lot of these are just giving potentially divine spellcasting or similar things to a lot of these kind of characters. Uh and I think the Avenger is going to be probably similar to like how Assassin can be, which is you get abilities that make it really easy for you to like kill enemies of a specific type or kind. I think Avenger might actually be a rogue. Actually, interesting idea. This is very interesting. A rogue that specializes in dealing damage to targets with either the holy or unholy trait.
Hmm.
Think that would be an interesting idea.
I think so too.
Uh,
Does Avenger Rogue mean that player core 2 will have an Arcane Rogue class archetype?
maybe. Who
Maybe.
knows?
At
We
least
don't
the
know.
book says only that it has like more than 40 archetypes. Isn't it? It's not hinting at anything. The only like new announcement that it's really even hinting at is the fact that it's yeah, the version on Paizo's site is the bit where they're showing 3 versatile heritages: the Dampier, the Duskwalker, and an all new heritage. I wonder what that one is. Thanks, Amazon, for telling us. Definitely not the dragon one. Yeah, the it at least isn't hinting at anything else.
Yeah, I don't know. And see, one of the hard parts about this is I don't have a way of framing things because this is the first time we're going to be getting non-magic classes as class archetypes. All class archetypes up until this point have been purely magic casters, which means I don't know what they're willing to I don't know what they're willing to shift because it's not a new racket. So for people who are like, "Oh, is Blood Rager going to use charisma? I doubt it, because it's just a barbarian with some slightly different stuff. And same thing for rogue. This isn't a racket. This is a class archetype. So it's not, you're gonna have a racket probably on top of the class archetype, unless specifically you need to take the class archetype for this racket because it's a very good racket. And Blood Rager, it's not going to become a Constitution class either. It's not, these shouldn't anyway. I don't know, because again, there's no precedent for it. It shouldn't change what the class like is basically.
Yeah.
I guess
like
Spell Shot is
archetype.
technically a class archetype. That's for marshals, but it's for gunslinger, which is strange, and one that people seem to not like overly well.
I'll be right back.
Honestly, if they give it spellcasting, I think it will just go based on class DC. But it's I don't know. I really don't know. Spell Shot doesn't really give anything, because Spell Shot looks just like another way. Only it gives some unique feats in addition. And maybe that is the thing. Who knows? So I don't know exactly what to expect. I feel like because this is a huge book, and I think this is one of the this is the first player guide since remaster, if we don't count Rage of Elements, because Rage of Elements happened technically before the first player core, even though it was completely remaster compatible. This is going to be the first book after both player cores have released, and so it's essentially like new line. And I feel like they're going to come out swinging with a lot of these, so I feel like a lot of them are going to be a lot of fun. And I feel like they really want to make this book as impressive as possible. And like, if y'all saw the art for War of Immortals, like, the art is super cool, has one of the Apocalypse writers on it. And this special edition is not blue like they tend to be, it's red, and it looks kind of cool, kind of comic booky, honestly. So, and I mean, this is also the book that we're getting Exemplar in. So I feel like a lot of these are going to be very fun, very, very interesting. And at the very least, they might just offer a bunch of unique feats that you can select as like an optional thing. So, like, similar to how Spell Shot works. It does, yeah. It really does. Also, I'm super stoked for the divine artifacts coming out in the book.
Yeah.
I mean, like, this sword was made from the armor of a dead god.
That part is gonna be like so cool. Just, I have the book page open. The idea of specifically new weapons, items, and spells for mythic characters implies like, oh, this is gonna be some scary stuff. This is gonna be really cool to read. Like, the idea of items and like all that specifically tailored for that, and also from what they talked about in the stream, the idea of everyone kind of running after these parts of a dead god because they're just really powerful is
Yeah.
so cool.
Seems like Norgriber is going to be very invested in it since he's in Curtain Call, or at least his followers are. So
Yeah,
and maybe even the Red Mantis assassins because they're in Pray for Death.
they're involved. They got something going on. I'm so curious. God, it's so. Why does it come out in like November? It should come out like now.
Also worth mentioning, I think the Emissary class archetype was the old shaman iconic. I mean, they try to make a lot of the characters they made, because even though a lot of them are they are actually like characters, they're just not like on the same pedestal as iconics tend to be. So that would make sense.
I'm also curious about the new stuff for Animus because that was hyped up when they last talked about it in the playtest review stuff, being like, Animus is pretty cool, but we got some extra interesting things cooking. I remember that
Yeah,
specifically.
Animus was interesting because it was a half prepared, half spontaneous spellcaster, which is interesting, still can be interesting. I'm very curious to see what they do with Animist overall, because like Exemplar was like chef's kiss already, really good, kind of like right out the gate. So Animist, I think they're gonna have to do a little bit more, but I feel like it's gonna feel good. I feel like it's gonna be better than Witch, because I remember there's a lot of talk around Witch when Witch was in playtesting, and then when Witch actually came out, it was pretty good, even though a lot of people didn't end up liking Witch in the end, and they needed to like remake Witch in a sense. Which, to be fair, it was kind of silly that Witch, it was a whole class based on their familiar, had a familiar that was as strong as an augmentation wizard. So, it's nice now that Witch's familiars actually seem way more impactful, and I think Witch got tuned up really well. Uh,
Mhm.
Animus, I feel like, is going to be very fun, and it's going to be one that's going to be very dynamic, but definitely a lot more complicated than a lot of other classes, which I think is fine because Exemplar is a very simple class, so they kind of balance each other out. Also, like, let's all not forget, Magus is getting 2 hybrid studies coming up in August in the Qianxia character guide. So
True.
we're talking about like a bunch of like class archetypes, but Magus is straight up getting more subclasses, which is very interesting. And like, I gotta say, Magus in general has a lot of really interesting hybrid studies that really change how you play. Like, one wants you to be one-handed or two-handed. One wants you to be either unarmed or using one hand. One makes stabs really, really cool as like a weapon. One makes you want to be a ranged one. So I'm very curious what the two new ones coming out in the character guide is going to be. And in addition, all the current hybrid studies have feats. So we're probably going to see some more Magus feats in the book as well. And probably not ones only for the new hybrid studies, if I was to hazard a guess.
Yeah, because like it's that, or they have to be so general that like if they're definitely going to add some new feats, but then also they'd have to be some generalized stuff still, that like there are feats that are currently in the game that are still able to be used. Because there's one that was like, what, it was unfurling brocade was one, right?
Yeah, something brocade, and I can't remember the other one.
Because
There's a
brocade
Reddit
has
post
to do
about
with
it.
fabrics. So it could be something to do with, like, you know, uh scarves. Maybe like you have like a bladed scarf or something. Who
I mean,
knows?
if you think of
Sick.
like Muram style Chinese movies, there is some
Yeah,
characters who have that fighting style where they like shoot out like a scarf from their sleeve or whatever.
that's why I thought. That's why I thought of that, because
Yeah.
I love that. I love those movies so much. They're absolutely the coolest.
Let's see here. I'm looking at we've been showing up on Reddit on the channel here lately, which has been really cool. Aloof Firmament and Unfurling Brocade. And Aloof Firmament, because they mentioned that this was going to be something for Magus anyway, is the one where they kind of like stand on their flying sword. So it's going to be a very floaty, maneuvery style of Magus, I'm assuming.
Makes sense.
And then Unfurling Brocade, probably like attacking people with your sleeves or something. I don't know. Oh my god.
Probably based around a whip. I think the idea that it's a whip base, but then like there's gonna be new weapons built around that, to not just be like, this is a Indiana Jones style whip. This is like, the idea of like fabric and like scarf idea that is in
I mean,
those movies.
there is there is a scarf weapon in the
Oh, didn't know that.
game. Uh Bladed scarf. Yeah, the bladed scarf is just a weapon. It's a two-handed weapon in the game. So, I don't know if they'd make you use a singular weapon, but at the same time, if they do, maybe they'll make it really strong. So, I don't know. Need a Magus class archetype that changes tradition/casting attribute. No. Like, I don't know why everyone here, like, not everyone here, obviously, but like a lot of people here want to change like class attributes or spellcasting traditions. That is a unique feature of some classes, that they get multiple traditions. Stop trying to take that from those classes by just shoehorning it into other things or changing attributes, because that's also a unique attribute for a lot of classes. Or the fact that a class has different attributes they can select. It's a more unique thing. Like, you don't need to necessarily change these aspects, because if every class can do it, it makes it no longer cool. And I feel like people want to do it just because it's an option to do it anyway. Because, like, let's be real, even if you could change Barbarian to like a Charisma one, for instance, or a Constitution one, like, why would you when Strength is so good? Because you're a Barbarian and the whole point of the class is to hit hard. It feels like it would just water it down a little bit. Well, yeah, but see, that was the thing in first edition, was that everything was just kind of everything. There was some class that was a mixture of classes or could do a thing or whatever. And like, that was fun, but it created metas because some skill lines, some attributes were just inherently better in some form or fashion. There are enough Eldritch Scion class archetypes on Pathfinder Infinite. Yeah, I mean, there's also that too.
And I don't know. It's, to me, the idea of like a mag or a magus like thing that changes how it's like, I guess, tradition or class spell casting idea works in general is just, well, then wouldn't that just be a different class? That's my immediate thought. Is it sounds like you just might want to play a different class. part of what makes Amogus feel like Amogus is that it's arcane, and that it's like a wizard that learned how to fight,
Yeah, I mean that's
and
exactly
that's
what it
part cool.
was.
Yeah, and then I don't know if you want to go like something different. Find a way to do like an occult martial, which I imagine there's a method for. Uh, I should know this. I've been making builds constantly.
Also, I will make special mention. You can already kind of do this in the game currently.
Oh
All
yeah,
you have to do is just multi-class archetype into a different spellcasting class, and you can have different traditions.
that is true.
Gonna be honest, having all 4 traditions is kind of holding Sorcerer back. Is it? In what way? I'm curious to see, because like Witch also gets it. So
The only thing I can think of is the idea that maybe it's the fact that you can't like specialize into either like a couple traditions, maybe. But I don't know. The whole idea is that you like pick a thing and like you have to embody that idea, like that creature or that entity in your bloodline. I'm curious what your reasoning is.
where are these issues though? But yeah, I'm not a fan of over homogenizing the game in general. I feel like having classes with unique, or at least slightly more unique attributes slash traditions is mostly a good things.
Yeah, I also feel like it's a thing that is to be kept in moderation, because I think there's the want to add constantly like new things that change up and like add everything. But also like it seems like from as an outsider perspective looking into like one of the main issues of Pathfinder First Edition is that there's just so many things in the game that essentially a lot of the design boils down to essentially once you add too many things into the game, you are adding text to the game that isn't useful text because it doesn't play meaningfully different, because there's just such a mass amount
Mm.
of like different classes that where it's like you have maybe 10 different ways of doing the exact same playstyle, and one of them is good. Where then for it's the idea of like mass adding a lot of like stuff to a game, where then a differing idea is like what we have currently, where you have a bunch of different playstyles, each class is different, but at some point Paizo does have to make the decision to stop adding new classes, because there will be a point where you have to be like, okay, we cannot add any more classes that like will feasibly add value to the game, because there's like the event horizon of now we're just adding like fluff. uh there's some streamlining that does have to happen. There's not the D&D 5e evil streamlining that is you're making your game boring, but there is the level of streamlining of you are wasting resources printing text that is useless. That at least is my perspective looking into Pathfinder 1e, because that was me playing Wrath of the Righteous and being like, what's the difference between these things? Why is there are so many? Every single thing I click has 6 different versions of it and they all feel very similar. What is going on?
And don't get me wrong, if that's an aspect you liked in Pathfinder First Edition, that's fine. The fact that you enjoyed that is fine.
Oh yeah, it's totally fine.
It's just, like a difference of opinion, which we're all free to have for sure. Uh, this is just our argument against, but you know, obviously there's the argument of, yeah, but I like the idea of like reskinning my class in more than just name alone.
I
And
think it is fair to like have the want to reskin, but I also think your game needs to have some limitations. There are some moments where a game needs to tell you like, or like, here's a character concept, and you have to be like, okay, you can't fully do that. There, you are going to have to make some adjustments to do that, or that isn't fully in this game. You are going to have to like change your idea. There is going to have to be some of that, I think, and it's still more to what I was saying of like my perceived issue with what I see when I look at Pathfinder First Edition's design.
Yeah,
The
and
yeah.
yeah, it's just like I said. It's if that's what you like, that's fine. We just we can just civilly disagree on it. Uh, so don't feel like we're necessarily attacking what you liked. I think it's
No.
fine.
Everyone's gonna, it's actually a thing that I am personally fascinated by, to be honest. I always come at this from a perspective of like, I just like hearing different people's ideas on what they enjoy, because and it's just like, I always also like to come at this from, I want to hear how people come to the opinions they have, because as long as it's done civilly, the assumption that everyone is just like chatting, talking about like and explaining their ideas civilly is where I always come from. I like just understanding why you believe the things you believe. And then also I'm fascinated by taste. I just think the idea that one person's reason for liking a thing being the exact same reason why somebody hates a thing, like the same thing, is genuinely really interesting to me. So I come at this in all in good faith. Also, I will say, Dead Phoenix, Sorcerer does feel a little weird. I have a lot of fun playing Sorcerer, but I can understand that it does feel lacking. I think it's only in class feats that it feels weird.
I don't know. I
I
think
don't know.
this
The class feats feel.
bloodline or the blood magic specifically was not always super applicable in
That too.
a lot of cases.
My divine spellcasting was also. I made a mistake of when I first played it. I was trying to play a blaster caster, but I went with the divine spellcasting.
Yeah, and you
That
played
was an issue.
divine spells really early, which was kind of
Mm-hmm.
rough because you had like
Yeah, a
no
little too early.
cantrips.
Basically, I had produce flame, and that was it. I think it's
Uh,
based on like you need to know what the bloodline is going to do for you, which is a problem if like you have a really strong character idea and then you look at the bloodline, you're like, "Oh no, this bloodline won't fit my build," which is not fun.
yeah, because it's like in order to use the bloodline spells or the blood magic, which is supposed to be a really strong or a really interesting part about the class. We look at like angelic, where uh you give a +1 stat bonus to saving throws for 1 round to either yourself or a target. It depends on who you're using either a granted spell or bloodline spell on, which is like, okay, so I have a very small limited number of spells I can actually cast to get a buff that seems very minor and not very influential in the game. And there are some bloodlines that feel like they're a little bit better than others. And I think I can at least understand the idea that like what else does sorcerer do but like cast spells? But I feel like the fact that they have the most spells of any class besides technically wizard, which that's more of a problem with wizard than anything of just being the uber caster, I
Mm-hmm.
think is one of their selling points. But I do think that even then, that is something that is not super impactful, because if you have leftover spells at the end of the day, you essentially didn't use your extra benefit spells, you know what I mean? So
I think that I'm really curious how the player core 2 is going to mess with sorcerer, because I feel like at the very least sorcerer's going to get a tune up that all of the bloodlines are going to be like on an equal playing field, because that is the thing where like some bloodlines are a little better than others.
Yeah, I don't know. I know that one of the things is the dragon stuff is going to completely change.
Yeah.
But as far as like how to improve it, because the reason why I think it's designed the way it is because they didn't want Sorcerer to become the de facto spellcaster for just having the pure fact that anytime you cast magic, your magic is just slightly better than everyone else's, you know? Because it's like, well, I could play a wizard, but my spells are technically more powerful as a sorcerer, you know. And I think Paizo like they tend to kind of overdid it a little bit and made a lot of the blood magic kind of not great because like aberrant, right? Uh, you grant yourself or a target +2 status bonus to will saving throws for a round. It's like cool, so I can use this and hope they use something that makes me use will, right? So if the enemy has nothing that affects my will, that's useless.
When you're fighting an enemy that's provoking will saves, it's nice, but it's like I hope they're doing that. But then meanwhile, then you look at Angelic, where it just gives you a +1 status bonus to saving throws for 1 round. Where it's like I'd rather have a +1 bonus to all saving throws than a +2 status bonus to a single type of saving throw.
Yeah.
Because that's just at least that one's coming up constantly, and Aberrant's coming up sometimes. Because
Yeah.
like, I'm more prompted to make a saving throw every turn than I am prompted to make a will save every turn. Unless for some reason, take Aberrant if you know that your GM really likes making like will saves. If your GM's a fucking weirdo, I guess.
And doesn't slightly better spell step on psychic? No. Psychic, yeah. They're the cantrip class. They
Yeah.
they have really good cantrips. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I feel like if anything,
Oh yeah, needle darts is something I'm taking with divine spellcasting now because needle darts is very nice.
I mean, divine spellcasting got good because spirit damage got introduced. Spirit damage
Yes,
is just like force damage now,
it's
essentially.
nice. I gotta say, the divine spell list is looking nicer. Whenever I look through it, I'm like, God, if only my boy had this a long time ago.
But I don't think necessarily Sorcerer was. I mean, maybe again, this is first release legacy content. I don't think it was necessarily nerfed though because it could use any tradition. Because Witch also could, but Witch also had extra stuff with like the familiar and everything. So while I don't think it's a tradition issue, I do think it's just an overall issue that the sorcerer's blood magic just doesn't feel up to snuff.
I feel like it is when I'm reading through Sorcerer, it's an issue where like Sorcerer was designed really early, which is a problem you see, because like I'm looking through and let's see, just looking through like the where the sources of a lot of these come through, and it's like yeah, pretty simple, like yeah, you get +1 save, +1 AC, and then like I scroll down and you get stuff from the advanced player guide where you get Genie, and it's like, oh, okay, that's actually a little interesting. uh you get stuff like the Harrow from Stolen Fate player guide, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, that's a little interesting. You become enveloped in possibility, represented as multiple versions of yourself from your possible futures overlaid on each other. You gain concealment for 1 round, but you can't use concealment to hide. Whoa, that's pretty cool. And then you get to the one at the bottom, the Worm Bless, the Mwangi Expanse one, where Draconic Might carries your voice. Either you gain a +1 status bonus to intimidation checks for 1 round, or a target takes -1 status penalty to will saves for 1 round. See, like you can impose will saves and then force will saves, And you're a divine caster, so I know you have a lot of will saves in there. I've seen the divine spell list. But like, yeah, the spells you get for the worm blessed bloodline are really cool actually. Um and also because you have your bloodline skills are intimidation and religion, so you're getting draconic like intimidation abilities. So it's the every time I see stuff that is not in the core book, it's significantly cooler and more interesting. So I think the biggest thing they need to do is just tune up the sorcerer to make it more in line with the rest of the game, which is the thing where when you are designing a game for long enough, your older content kind of falls out because you get cooler new ideas and you become better at designing your game. It's what we talked about when it's the idea of feature and content creep.
Yep.
It's just you get better, your stuff gets cooler to sell new books. For competitive stuff, it becomes like you sell out the new meta thing because you know the meta thing will sell and like move product. For this, it's I think more in nature of just the designers got better and they knew what the game was gonna be, and then they have the cooler, crazier ideas, and the remaster is a chance to make sure they can uplift all the older stuff in line with the new stuff.
Yeah. And I think in the end, though, like, I think one part that Dead Phoenix is having here is Sorcerer feels like it's just very passive.
Yes, I do agree.
And
Low
I
level
don't
sorcerer feels lame.
I don't think that's actually a bad thing, because if you want to like have someone play a spell, like a new player wants to play a spellcaster, you want to give them a spellcaster that doesn't have a whole lot of, like bells and whistles for them to worry about. I feel like that's not a bad thing for Sorcerer to take place in, though I understand that that's equally frustrating, because it's like, yeah, but I want to play a really cool Sorcerer, but it just feels very passive. And
Yeah, it's that problem of like for that type of design where it's on one hand there's that. I think you have a good point because like for me when I was learning it, that was a really cool element of sorcerer. It was I think a really good way to learn how to play the game. uh it taught me how to play Pathfinder really well. But on the other hand, once I became more proficient, early level sorcerer was really boring because I wasn't doing a lot. It was just
yeah,
kind of like you noticed it and like I mentioned as much. It was basically the play. My gameplay was like I cast a spell and I stand there. I cast a spell and I stand there, and that gets boring. And then basically you look around your table and you see your other players doing cooler things. That's I think a problem with sorcerer. And there's it's the double-headed thing with that is on one hand it's a great way to teach a player how to play the game. On the other hand, it can get boring real fast. I also agree. I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I think it can be solved with tuning up the classes, the feats for sorcerer. I think sorcerer has some of the absolute most boring feats I've ever looked at.
I mean,
The
yeah,
class feats for sorcerer are an absolute snooze fest.
yeah. I mean, spellcasters in general, when the game first came out, had not a lot of interesting spell feats. Almost none of them
True.
effectively changed how you played by all too
Wizard's a little
much.
better at least. Wizard feats are better.
They're better
Um
now. They weren't
Now
really in the beginning.
I'll say Wizard before the remaster too. I at least felt like with meta magic stuff, I felt like I could be a better blaster caster with like I had ways to get around resistance and like overcharge resistances and stuff. I had ways of just better nukes, basically, is what it felt
Well,
like. It felt
some of
cool.
that stuff came out in Advanced Player's Guide.
True. Then yeah, right at the beginning, 100%. Like, yeah, if I was playing a wizard instead of a sorcerer, like right at the beginning when we got into it, then I probably would have had the same feeling. But like, yeah, I think just tuning up those feet, man.
Uh,
God.
the evolution feats are really good. I think they're some of the strong points. I think that there's a lot of dead levels when it comes to feat pickups, though, that don't feel as good. And it does feel like Sorcerer kind of has been left in the dust a little bit when you compare it to like Wizard and everything Wizard has gained over the years. So yeah, I think feat wise they're probably gonna get some more stuff. I think some of their blood magic is gonna get tuned up as well. I don't think they're gonna add any additional features to Sorcerer necessarily. But maybe I can see them upgrading their their focus spells essentially for free or have like a
Mhm.
better feat for doing so. It's I don't know. It's a very interesting one and it's one that I just have not really paid a lot of attention to be fair. But it is just straight up it's a caster, period. It's not like,
Yeah.
"Oh, what kind of wizard are you?" Because there's different schools that give you extra spells, and then in addition to that, there's theories that your character's studying to change how your character essentially functions. Like, do you just make your own spell staff, which is super cool? Are you better at summoning creatures? That's super cool. And I mean, Witch now has its familiars, and Cleric at least had War Priest as like a more martial option. And honestly, domains are some of the coolest things in the game. Like, I feel like people really don't understand how insane it is that a whole portion of the game is just dedicated to Cleric's domain, like, uh, focus spells, essentially. Because every time they add a new domain, they just get more spells. And they're really cool. And I guess technically Oracle, because Oracle can also get some more. But it does feel like Sorcerer's kind of the basic bitch of the bunch. So
Mhm. It's the class where it just kind of feels like, yeah, honestly, I'm trying to like think to any announcement where there's been sorcerer stuff, and even I was like paging through the last sorcerer anything was Moangi Expanse, which I mean it wasn't super like long ago, but like that was the last like it was like a single bloodline. It feels like a lot of the other classes get a lot more attention and love, and like wizard gets a lot more of the attention, and then sorcerer is, yeah, just kind of there.
yeah. So I don't think it was necessarily a design problem of they had all traditions, so they were made bad. I think it was just more the developers gave them additions onto their spellcasting, and then they were afraid that that might make them too strong, and just kind of didn't do a whole lot with them. I again, I'm not necessarily saying that Sorcerer is not even bad right now. You can still play Sorcerer
Mm-mm.
really, really well, and I
I
think
think
there's some really fun
everything
ones.
everything in the game is still like good, and also like can be tuned up if needed. It's, your game, your GM can give you an item or two, can help you out if needed. Like there are ways around it. And also just everything in the game already math wise is workable. It's fine. The only bit I can see causing any sort of issue is that problem I had, especially in early level sorcerer, where you just kind of get to have to sit there and be like, do I get to do anything cool and extra fun? No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Actually, so I have an interesting solution. Uh, I think what they could do is they restrict blood magic further to only being effective on their bloodline spells, but just make stronger blood magics to go with them.
Yeah.
Like
Makes sense.
like for Abhorrent, for instance, which has like tentacular limbs, which gives you the ability to extend your touch to or strikes to a further distance if every time you hit with your blood magic when it's apparent, the enemy suffers a like a -1 to their will saves for a round or something, or even -2 if it's just gonna be just their bloodline spells.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Then
not saying like we get you, Dead Phoenix. Not saying like not complaining about its power level, but the main bit is I think that a tune-up would make Sorcerer more fun as
yeah,
well. Well,
I
I
think
think
we
this would be a
overall
fun tune-up.
agree.
Yeah, we all agree.
I think we overall
Uh,
agree. I think the only contention was it was because that they got multiple traditions, which I don't think was the case. I just think that the spell design was just they were very cautious early game with designing stuff. Similarly with Alchemist, which I am sure we're also going to get some new stuff with.
the new and improved Alchemist, I also am curious to look at because the
Just give me
important thing,
crafting every like for free,
they
please.
better. That's important because Inventor has it.
Yeah. But that's gonna be it for today, I think. There's a lot, and we didn't even touch everything. We didn't talk about the millions of archetypes. Like, so archetypes are coming out literally next month with Hell of the Wild. Then we're going to be getting actually some new archetype stuff in the Player Core 2. And some reworking on some archetype stuff. And we're going to get some archetypes in the Qiansha character guide. And then we're going to be getting some archetypes in the War of Immortals book. And then Divine Mysteries as well. So, I mean, like, beyond the class archetypes, there's also just going to be a bunch of archetypes that are coming out. That are going to change everything. I got the hiccups now.
Uh-oh.
Suffering. Swarm Keeper, yeah, Swarm Keeper. So
yeah, the Blue Mage, Wild Mimic.
yeah, there's a lot coming out. It's all coming out on the channel. So, like I said before, subscribe, follow, do whatever. We're going to be talking about it here. We're going to be looking at the playtest when it comes out. Videos will be coming out on it, and I'm going to be currently working on the new Qiansha World Guide that I just received, and a new video will be coming out either tomorrow or the following Monday. But before we go, is there anything else you want to leave us off with, Alex?
Yeah, if you're interested in Pathfinder lore, alongside all of this cool new releases, then go over to my channel, Glue Boy. It's linked in Cam's YouTube channel, and also just look up Glue Boy on YouTube. I just put out a video on Pathfinder 2nd Edition, like a setting overview. Not like a full-on, like, step-by-step timeline guide, but more of, here is what the setting vibes are, here's, like, what you can expect if you're going into all this. And going forward, we are also going to have more. I'm going to actually make some more in-depth videos in the future. So stay tuned to that if you're interested in Pathfinder specifically. But otherwise, I cover Warhammer 40k, Vampire the Masquerade, and random other stuff that catches my eye.
Yeah, and I guess I should leave you all off with a hint or something. We have another guests currently scheduled,
I'm
hopefully
excited.
soon. It's another really fun person to talk to. So, yeah, hopefully everything goes through. It has gone through so far, so I wouldn't imagine it being different. But we're going to have more people here on the channel talking, and maybe even more game developers for other games. So, that being the case, it's not a channel you want to miss out on. Join the Discord linked in the description where we talk all things tabletop there. But that's going to be it for us. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.
Bye.